Shakespeare's classic, Act 3, Scene 1. Brutus stabs Caesar in the back as the Roman senators watch. A similar betrayal occurred on the eve of the Ides of March on the floor of the U.S. Senate, as Chuck Schumer, the highest-ranking Jewish member of Congress, plunged the proverbial knife right into Benjamin Netanyahu by calling for his ouster. And President Biden agrees. Watch this.
Senator Schumer contacted my staff, my senior staff. He's going to make that speech, and I'm not going to elaborate on the speech. He made a good speech, and I think he expressed a serious concern, shared not only by him but by many Americans.
He made a good speech. So what does this mean for the already strained U.S.-Israel relationship? Let's find out from foreign policy expert Harley Lippman. Also with us is Newsmax foreign policy analyst and the author of Iran, an Imperialist Republic and U.S. Policy. That's Walid Faris. So good to have you both. Harley, let me talk to you for a second. How disruptive and cynical was Schumer's call for new elections in Israel and taking really direct aim at Prime Minister Netanyahu?
Yeah, Netanyahu was scapegoated now because of everybody's frustration with the war in Gaza. But the truth is, it's really just politics. What do I mean by that? For one, it serves Biden's political agenda because he wants to shore up support among the liberal progressives, and he wants to get some more support among Arab Americans who seem to be criticizing him for his support for Israel. From the Israeli perspective, if there's one issue that Israelis are united behind Bibi Netanyahu on, it's not having a Palestinian nation. So this fits Bibi's narrative, it fits Biden's narrative. Read between the lines, there are negotiations, it's the first salvo. The real question is, what will a Palestinian state look like? Because you could argue Gaza is a Palestinian nation. And the only way you're going to have peace there, not if there's a Palestinian nation. There'll be no miracles just because you have a Palestine. It's, do you have democratic institutions, a free press, an independent judiciary? Are you fighting corruption? Are you combating terrorism? Do you have a good relationship with Israel? These are the things that will make a Palestinian state viable or not.
So, Walid, I totally agree with what Harley said. I mean, this is really about domestic politics to placate the crazies on the left, and they control the Democratic Party. But what message does this send to Hamas, Iran, Hezbollah, and all the other bad actors?
Well, absolutely. Well, let me visit it, first of all, from our domestic, linking it to international relations. Imagine if Russia would say, well, we don't like Mr. Biden. We won the elections at that day. We want it to be early, and we would like to have Mr. Trump at the White House. Just imagine that. What would be the reaction? We are meddling in Israeli politics. This is different from meddling for human rights. I mean, Israel is a democracy. It's a liberal democracy. Would we say the same thing about the government in France or in Germany? This is, in my view, constitutionally and international law perspective, unacceptable on the one hand. But on the other hand, the fact that the speaker or the high-ranking politician in America is meddling in Israeli politics, it means that they are interested. This will go only to support those who are supporting the Iran deal. There is no other explanation. Of course, there is the domestic issues that Mr. Harley said, but there is also this international impact. And to answer your question, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iran regime, the Houthis, they're going to be on steroids. If we have leaders, but the majority in the Senate and the President of the United States trying to bring down a prime minister by putting the pressure of the United States on Israeli elections, that would that would give all that access of terror, all what they need to continue with their war against Israel and against us. It will be attacks against U.S. forces because the U.S. leadership appears to be weak and meddling where it should not belong.
No, exactly. And Harley, when Biden and Schumer and all the others say that they want a two-state solution, a Palestinian state, what does that actually mean for Israel and the region? What would that look like?
You know, this is the most amazing question because Israel has never been against the Palestinian nation. The reason why we don't have a Palestine is that in 1948, when they created Israel and a Palestine, Israel survived. The Arab nations went to destroy it. And then what was to be Palestine, Jordan and Egypt took. Egypt took Gaza, and Jordan took the West Bank, which was supposed to be a Palestine. So nobody talks about that. But the reason why we don't have a Palestinian nation is only because the Arab world made sure that it didn't happen. And yet why I'm saying that is because everybody blames Israel for everything. And I think the real issue here to me is Israel has to be allowed to win the war, because only then will you have peace in the region. I go back to World War II. Why is it that 80 years later, neither Germany or Japan have any interest in war whatsoever? Why? Because they were utterly and totally defeated first. You have to defeat your enemy. Then, once they cry uncle, you can then talk about a Marshall Plan as we had in Europe, and you could talk about democratic reforms and a Palestinian nation. But if you don't defeat Hamas, they'll rise up out of the rubble and say, we stood up against the largest military power in the Middle East for 6 months, and we're still here. And it will mobilize, to quote my guest, it would put on steroids Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, because they would claim victory. And the notion would be, see, you can stand up to the Israelis. So there's no substitute for victory if you want peace.
Yeah, the terrorists have all the leverage. And talks broke down for a 10-to-1 prisoner swap for hostages and a ceasefire. Biden warned Netanyahu to not cross into Rafah in the south. 1.5 million people there. Okay, it's an entry point for humanitarian aid. But it's basically the last region for the IDF to flush out Hamas. So, Walid, what options now does Netanyahu have?
The only option, there are not many options, the only option is to actually remove Hamas and immediately call the international community to assume its role, its responsibility in Gaza in terms of aid. Not doing this little port by U.S. forces to aid a population that is controlled by Hamas, as it would have been the case if Al-Qaeda was in control. Second, our diplomacy should be pressuring other Arab governments, the coalition of Arab governments, to tell them, play your role. You are here to support the Abraham Accord. Make sure to help Israel in terms of ending Hamas and propose names for a potential authority in Gaza that would be part of the Abraham Accord. So many things our diplomacy can do, but it's not doing, unfortunately.
Harley Lippman and Walid Faris, we appreciate you both coming on. Thanks again.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Fani Willis gets to stay, and the Mar-a-Lago document case must go on. That's the bad news Donald Trump got this week. We'll tackle that next with our legal team. Oh, before we go, though, take a look at this serenity of Saranac Lake, the village there. It's in New York, courtesy of our friends at EarthCam. I've been there plenty of times and on the lake, which is gorgeous.